The door breathes open like something long sealed for winter. Air, silted with dust and hymnals, moves just enough to disturb the brittle caution tape, its color gone to the yellow of old teeth. The choir room is smaller than memory, colder than June should have allowed, and every object wears a patience that borders on accusation. On the floor, scuffed linoleum, a pale oval where the music stand once stood. On the wall, the hymn board still blank, though the last verse sung here ended 41 years ago. The piano lid is closed, as if to spare the keys the indignity of being counted as evidence. Time has stayed. That is the first wrongness. Time has stayed as if waiting for someone with a steadier hand to come back and admit what they missed. She was Evelyn Rae Mallory, 27, night shift nurse at Briar County General, part-time pianist in a church where the air conditioner rattled through summer homilies. Born in Selma, raised on county roads that taught her every mailbox by dent and lean, she carried 2 jobs and 1 mother. Widowed, arthritic, grateful for a daughter who could make barley soup taste like better years. She wore her hair straight because curls took time, and she wore a small brass locket with a photo of her mother squinting against light. On June 12, 1984, a Tuesday, Evelyn played scales in this room at 8:05 p.m., left a metronome on the stand, and then, by the account of absence and blood spatter, met the end of her future at 8:24, give or take the margin conceded by a coroner who favored certainty and cigarettes. The investigator who steps in again is not young, but he carries the steady motions of a man who taught himself to keep movement quiet. Caleb Rourke, 66, retired lieutenant, consultant by necessity now that a county attorney wants a ribbon cut on an old wound. In 1984, he was a deputy who marked evidence with a hand that trembled only after he left the room. He misfiled a small thing, he thinks. He misread a smaller thing. He has carried both like coins in a pocket that never closes. He looks first at the window latch. Everyone did. The latch had been taped open, adhesive long since desiccated into the papery ridges of a scab. Back then, the taped latch meant a burglar, a stranger, a story that could be told without nomming anyone in the pews. The choir director had found her. The church janitor had called. The sheriff had chosen the right amount of anger for television. On the piano bench, a smear where a wrist touched while falling. Under the piano, a dropped program with the date stamped in purple. On the metronome, a fingerprint that led nowhere and so was filed under wishful thinking. Rourke moves through the room with that quiet restraint that's some mistake for reverence, but which is only a learned economy. Don't waste motion, don't waste breath, don't waste the sliver of attention that memory grants you when you enter a place where you failed. He has walked this room in dreams that broke into sweat, dreams where the tape folds back onto itself and the window takes his face in its reflection and shows him younger and not enough. He opens his notebook because it is something to do with his hands. The paper sounds like a small tide. Detective. The young evidence tech, young to him, which means anyone who wasn't born when the first photographs were taken here, keeps her voice low. He nods but doesn't answer. The ghosts of old evidence rise in the corners, chalked outlines that never existed, just a newsman's shorthand, labels curling on boxes, the faint bleach that never yields back what it touched. He measures silence the way he used to measure shoe impressions. It is larger here, possibly because he knows its weight. The file on Evelyn said she had a habit of humming when anxious. A neighbor said it, and the neighbor was believed because she was elderly and had never missed a Christmas service. The file also said Evelyn had been reconciling the choir fund with the church treasurer, small money, small checks, petty cash in a tin. Back then, no one asked if tin had a smell the way blood does. Back then, the night was a thing the town felt it understood. Coyotes, trucks, television glow from trailers along the creek. The first time he saw Evelyn, she was already a photograph. DMV stale-lipped, hospital ID tire-dyed, church directory smile that looked like hope the camera wouldn't make her look severe. The first time he saw her in person, she was laid out in the sort of order that death imposes because the living prefer their secrets contained. Even in that, she looked like someone who might have saved more people than she harmed. Rourke had written that in a private margin and then crossed it out, and then recopied it because the heft of his dumb sentiment felt like relief. The crime scene whispers a thesis to him now, the way it always has. Someone planned a window. Someone staged a chaos. He marks that sentence again, not because it is new, but because the graphite line grounding it feels like re-earning the right to read it. A church bell from the sanctuary next door gives a throat-clearing thunk, metal sticky with disuse. Dust motes turn, slow planets. Rourke puts on gloves, though it is a genuflection more than a necessity at this point. He traces the route from door to piano, piano to window, window back to door, like a man walking off a crime as if it were a mileage he could reduce to footsteps and chalk. He stops where the music stand used to be, where the metronome once ticked an even 88 steady, with the indifference that makes people trust machines. No mood, no mercy. He imagines Evelyn reaching to silence it. He imagines the silence coming from somewhere else instead, a swing of something blunt, a sound like furniture making a decision. He keeps the imagining short, as if indulgence were another contaminant. Outside, the afternoon is a white glare that pushes at the stained glass but doesn't warm it. Inside, the temperature feels like the inside of a swallowed stone. He writes one word in his notebook, again. The room, with its frozen patience, seems to accept this. It has been waiting for the word. 2. Case reopens due to discovery of new crucial evidence. The case does not warm its pride. In late September, a cedar hope chest is donated to the church thrift sale by a family clearing an aunt's house in Montgomery. Between a crocheted afghan and a brittle wedding veil, a disposable camera in sun-bleached plastic rattles. The thrift coordinator, who saves things for the scrapbook, tosses it in a box with costume jewelry and a stack of programs tied with twine. Another volunteer, retired from the pharmacy, wonders if the film could still be developed. A hobbyist with a basement lab says maybe, if the emulsion isn't completely dead. Curiosity is not justice, but sometimes it is a hinge. 8 photographs survive. The first frames are daylight, Sunday clothes, children holding cups of pink punch. The last 2 are dim, fluorescent. The fluorescent ones matter. The choir room, the same that holds its breath even now. It's June 12, 1984 if the program on the edge of the piano in the frame can be trusted. The purple ink stamp bleeds just enough to show the 12. The metronome sits still, its pendulum pegged to 0, a small triangular sentinel. A window latch is wrapped, neat, in cloth tape, an illogic posing as precaution. On the mirrored surface of the piano's fallboard, turned down halfway, a faint reflection holds the curve of a wristwatch with a cracked crystal and a blocky 8 where the minute marker ought to be. Not a face, just the watch, tilted to catch the fluorescent stripes, a fractured crescent of light where the crystal breaks the beam. The hobbyist recognizes the room. The hobbyist calls his sister. The sister calls the church. The church calls the sheriff's office because the name Evelyn is not a name you forget here. What reopens a case isn't just the object, it is the arithmetic it disrupts. The latch, taped before the murder by someone who belonged in that room. The metronome, unstarted in the photograph but reported as ticking by the choir director in his statement. The watch reflection, if it is a watch, telling a time quicker than the coroner's window allows. The program edge, identical to the one found under the piano, indicating someone tidied and replaced and staged. The county attorney flags it in a memo whose tone is as neutral as a scalpel. Photographic evidence potentially inconsistent with 1984 witness statements. If polite language had a sound, It would be this memo, soft, closing doors one click at a time, never slamming. Local news calls it a break. Rourke calls it new math. The evidence is processed with care that feels ecclesiastical. The tape on the latch, though desiccated, still holds a whisper of adhesive. Modern labs can coax touch DNA from the backs of ghosts, and they try. The adhesive yields a mitochondrial profile, a line, not a dot, promising ancestry and long odds rather than a name. It is compared chuggingly to databases the county could never have imagined when the first report was typed on a rattling IBM. It is, for now, a filament. The photograph, however, is immediate. In it, on the far edge of the fallboard's reflection, a square of paper with a handwritten note shows backward in mirror script. Call Dale 815, keys. The handwriting is tidy. The letter A is printed open. The choir director, Dale Pritchard, has always denied picking up his keys before practice that night. He said he got them at 9 after the ambulance. 9 was the time he wanted to remember. 9 made him late and distant. The note says otherwise. Rourke holds the enlarged print under a magnifier. The room hums, the fluorescent light above skitters imitating lightning poorly. The line of the cracked watch crystal becomes more insistent the longer he stares. He wants to assign it a minute. He wants to declare 8:14 as if time could become firm by proclamation. He doesn't. He writes, watch reflection, possibly 8:14, confirm with watch owner, identify source. Then he circles watch owner twice. The question mark to him is a bruise. The photo becomes a new axis. Reporters lean on the church fence and search their memory for the color of Evelyn's car. The congregation, aged now into careful recollection, remembers a white Datsun and the yellow of a dress she wore one Easter. The thrift volunteers remember only the cedar smell. They are thanked in the kind of letter counties send that look convincing pinned to a refrigerator. In the sheriff's office, the case file is retrieved from a room where the boxes collapse a little each summer and are propped back up by interns in August. The metal clasp resists and then yields. The paper smells like damp cardboard and earnestness. Who brought the camera? The evidence tech asks, mostly to the air. Rourke says, someone who wanted to remember a church, not a crime, and regrets the reach for lyric even as he says it. He's here to measure the distance between two times, the photograph and the dead woman. The room tightens around the difference. He returns to the choir room. He stands where the photographer must have stood, near the piano, slightly low, holding the camera at chest height because disposable lenses are unkind. He tries to align angles. The reflection on the fallboard yields a warped version of the bench and the wall behind. With the new photo's vector in mind, he understands how the camera caught the wrist and watch. Someone stood just out of frame, hand on the piano lid, leaning for balance. The someone needed the fallboard lowered to capture a certain reflection. The someone knew the room's habits. The tape on the latch is neat. The someone knew how to make neatness look like accident. He notes the watch again because the watch, unlike the tape, has the decency to be a thing. If he can find the person who wore it in 1984, he can place a body in the room when the latch was taped. Memory, he knows, is a stagehand prone to applause lines. Objects are quieter. They rehearse their positions without vanity. A call comes from the lab. The tape's mitochondrial profile is not a match to any of the original suspects' known matrilines. It clusters instead with a family name common in the county's eastern farms and uncommon in the west. The janitor's ex-wife was from the east. The choir treasurer's maiden name is from the east. The lab's words are careful. Could be consistent with. Consistent is a bridge he can walk across without feeling the height. The county attorney schedules a press conference 2 weeks hence, careful to name it an update. Rourke hates the word for what it tries to make of grief. A software word, he thinks, for a bone job. Still, he admits, privately, inwardly, where admission can't be cross-examined, that the photograph is not a ghost. It is a hand on a doorknob. He can turn it. 3. Investigator examines past reports to identify overlooked details. Past reports are a city that built itself while no one was looking, streets with the wrong names, houses with back doors. Rourke spreads them in a conference room gone pale with the light of long afternoons, each page an address to revisit, each staple a locked gate. He starts with the first officer's notes. Arrival at 8:41 p.m., glass intact, latch taped, victim supine near piano, blunt force trauma, no defensive wounds, metronome on floor, choir director outside on the steps visibly upset, janitor in hallway breathing hard, treasurer summoned by phone at 8:56 p.m. He circles glass intact. He underlines latch taped because it was underlined then, as if emphasis could do the work of skepticism. He reads the choir director's statement aloud in a thin whisper, a way of forcing the phrases to touch the air. I arrived at 8:30, found the door unlatched, called for Evelyn, didn't hear, saw her on the floor, called out to Dale janitor for help, checked her pulse, called the sheriff from the office phone. The transcript records a pause of 11 seconds, an eternity in a room where someone is dying, but it had meant nothing then. People pause, grief stalls in the throat. Rourke knows better now. Pauses are gears. He flips to the janitor's statement. Dale Pritchard. When Mr. Mayfield, choir director, hollered, I come quick, I checked the back hallway. Window latch was messed with. I said we should call you all. There is a confidence to the order of his actions that sounds like memory rehearsed rather than lived. He lists steps like a man listing chores. He says messed with instead of taped, though every report calls it tape. He writes his time as 8:35 without saying how he measured it. He uses no hedges. Rourke has learned to fear statements without hedges. He pours the treasurer's page. Marion Coyle, I was at home. Choir was canceled because of heat. I got a call from Mr. Mayfield around 9. I came down. She says canceled but not called off, the phrase used by everyone else. It is nothing, it is something. Word choices make a small map of where people learn to speak and sometimes whom they learned it from. Rourke writes in the margin, canceled v called off, check her calendar. He hates himself for the comedy of it, linguistics in a homicide. But he has too many cases solved by the weight of a word to ignore a stone that small. He reads the property logs with the anxiety of seeing an old photograph of himself. There he is. Deputy C. Rourke signed out a roll of friction tape from the evidence locker at 10:12 p.m. for fingerprint lift, returned empty on June 14. He does not remember this, and yet he remembers everything about this week. The smell of copier toner, the way coffee scorched on the hot plate by noon, the brass cross dented on one arm that sat on the choir room shelf. If he took tape, he was doing his job, lifting prints from smooth surfaces. But lifting prints from what? The metronome, the window latch, the piano fallboard. The logs do not specify. He writes his own name on a separate sheet, as if entering it among suspects could cancel whatever it is he worries he did. Miss a print, contaminate a surface, accept a staged scene as gospel because of the relief that a staged scene offers, a story to repeat. He checks the phone records for the church lines. One outgoing call at 8:34 from the office to the sheriff's office, consistent with a panic. One incoming at 8:19 to the office from Lark's feed and seed pay phone on County 12. Lark's closed at 8. A pay phone outside might still ring with the untidiness of after-hours errands. Who called? There is no note. In the margin of the 1984 binder, someone had written wrong number in blue ink. Rourke stares at those two words long enough to feel insulted by their lack of curiosity. He takes a ruler and draws a line from 8:19 to 8:24, coroner's earliest possible time of death, to 8:30 choir director's arrival, to 8:34 call to sheriff, to 8:41 first officer on scene. The line resembles a staircase someone fell down. He reads the lab write-ups. Blood pattern suggests a single blow from an object with a tapered face, possibly the metronome's wooden body or the iron music stand base. Secondary spatter absent, indicating attacker stood back or shielded. No trace skin under victim's nails. No signs of sexual assault. No theft. The petty cash tin contained $18.47. He circles $18.47 because a number that exact feels like a man slapping his pockets and saying, "See, all there." The treasurer's ledger from the same week shows a deposit of $18.47. The next week, $23.12. He is not interested in the money. He is interested in what correctness looks like when someone is overcommitted to it. The interviews with neighbors. A dog barked at 8:28. Truck engine sounded from the alley at 8:29. Him through the open window at 8:10. Wrong night, wrong season. He writes him and remembers the way the sanctuary's sound carries. A trough of air between rooms that can make last week's service seem like tomorrow's rehearsal. He visits the church office. The filing cabinet sticks at the bottom drawer. The clerk, new, polite, allergic to the past, lets him alone to cough the drawer into compliance. In a manila folder labeled Facilities 1984, he finds a purchase order for friction tape 2 rolls, June 7, signed by Marion Coyle. The reason: window latches, choir and nursery secure in summer. Church wisdom says in heat, wood swells, metal resists. People tape things so doors won't stick or windows won't slam. Innocent tape exists. He writes, tape existed in building prior. He also writes, tape used neatly on latch and photo. Note says call Dale 815, keys, Dale has keys. Marion signs tape order. A triangle begins to form on his page. Marion tape, Dale keys, Mayfield call times. In the center, Evelyn, who had the misfortune to be the only person in the room without a reason to make the room lie. He reviews the choir director's second interview conducted 3 days after the funeral, conducted badly. The deputy then, Rourke's partner, long retired, asked if the director and Evelyn were close, and when the director paused, the deputy filled the silence with like brother and sister, to which the director said, yes. The transcript places no weight on who supplied the phrasing. Rourke, now, reads the pause differently. He places a finger on the pause and considers it a statement. He examines photographs not developed in 1984 because the budget didn't allow it. Brown envelope stamped hold, not relevant. He orders them scanned. In one, the piano fallboard shows a faint residue where tape had been affixed, a rectangle's shadow. Someone taped the lid down earlier that week, to keep the warped wood from vibrating, or to set a stage. In another, the metronome's pendulum has a faint thumb smear on the metal bob. Left thumb. Dale is left-handed. He signs his statement with an ink flow that smears leftward into his own palm. Marion is right-handed. Her ledgers are tidy on the right margin. Mayfield's baton in old photographs angles from his right hand. He writes, left thumb on metronome. He writes, Dale left-handed. The shape of the case adjusts, a camera lens clicking from soft to a little less soft. He finds a small, devastating thing in a place where the past expected no one to look. A maintenance request form carbon copied for the sanctuary's clock repair. The clock above the chancel had been 10 minutes fast in early June. The repairman's note, adjusted June 10, now correct. The choir director in his first statement said the bell chimed 8:30 as he entered. If the bell had been 10 minutes fast on June 10 and corrected that day, then on June 12 the chime would have been true. If the director marked his arrival by a fast bell in his memory, he was remembering a different Tuesday. If he corrected mid-sentence and never told them, he folded time to fit alibi. Rourke writes, bell truthful June 12. If he heard 8:30, he was at 8:30, but he said he called at 8:34. 4 minutes to enter, see call, possible. He adds, but note on piano, call Dale 815 keys. If Dale there earlier, why 8:15? Then small, almost an afterthought, he writes, call from Larks at 8:19. The word Larks looks ridiculous in his hand, as if birds were complicit. He closes his eyes long enough to hear paper settle. The overlooked details are not heroic, no hidden diary, no confession misplaced in a hymnal, but they collect. A word choice, a watch reflection, a left-hand smear, a bell with its pride restored. He feels the old guilt, the kind that is unspectacular, administrative, the guilt of not asking who ordered the tape and why. He prints out the photograph of the watch reflection and pins it above the timeline. If the watch can be found, the wearer will have to explain the angle of his hand, the neatness of his tape, the way he shadowed himself into the border of a life. The room quiets to let the thought grow. Lieutenant, the evidence tech says from the doorway, catching herself on the old title because it sounds like a key. He doesn't correct her. We found an old property receipt in a box behind the locker. It's your signature. Roll of tape. June 12. I saw, he says. Do you remember what you used it for? He considers lying to himself. He chooses an answer he can carry. I expect I will. He turns another page, not because it tells him anything new yet, but because pages have always been the way he moves forward without pretending he knows where he's going. The overlooked details wait, polite, convinced he will eventually ask the right question in the right order. He tries to deserve their patience. The church looks smaller now, or perhaps the years have simply given it the humility of an aging witness, less certain, more brittle, resigned to silence. Inside, the pews glimmer faintly under the fluorescent hum of early evening. Rourke sits in the last row, watching light pool on the floorboards like the residue of past arguments. He's read all the statements, matched the timelines, pinned every photograph. Now comes the part that requires human fallibility, belief, denial, and the way people rehearse both. There are three of them who matter. Three faces that orbit Evelyn Mallory's death like old planets unwilling to admit decay. One Dale Pritchard, the janitor. Left-handed, steady with tools, fired from Briar County General in 1982 for misplaced supplies, rehired by the church the following spring. His handwriting curls to the left, tidy loops of a man who fears errors. He'd fixed the window latches the week before the murder and was seen by a deacon arguing with Evelyn in the parking lot a month earlier. The subject, church funds, choir access, and, according to rumor, a key. He claimed Evelyn accused him of stealing donation envelopes. He denied it, his tone so calm it made everyone else sound guilty. His alibi, he was cleaning the nursery until he heard Mayfield shout at 8:30. His weakness, precision. His version of events was too clean, his times too even. 8:30 sharp. No one remembers things that sharp unless they've been polished. 2. Marion Coyle, the treasurer. Meticulous, devout, allergic to sympathy. Her ledgers were models of correction, her memory rehearsed. She ordered the tape, handled the petty cash, and managed the choir's checkbook. She also received a personal loan from Evelyn, $50, never repaid. In her second statement, she mentioned Evelyn's private concern over a missing donation jar. That phrase, private concern, feels like warning disguised as virtue. Her alibi, home heat, canceled choir. A husband asleep, a phone call at 9. Her weakness, distance. She spoke of Evelyn as the girl. In a small town, that's less an age and more a dismissal. 3. Thomas Mayfield, the choir director. Once the town's golden boy, now a man blurred by years and the shrinking radius of reputation. His voice in the old recordings is warm, low, designed to sound sincere. In his first statement, he was shocked, but calm enough to correct the spelling of metronome on his report. He had called the sheriff's office himself, supposedly after discovering Evelyn's body. He had also been seen leaving the church earlier that day with her, carrying sheet music. They were alone. He denied impropriety, but something in the way he phrased it, "I respected her work," carried the antiseptic chill of guilt rehearsed too long. His alibi, he arrived late, found her dead, called for help. His weakness, the photograph. In the mirrored surface of the piano lid, the cracked watch ticks in his handwriting. Rourke watches them one by one, called into the interview room like echoes dragged through time. Mayfield first, trembling with the weight of nostalgia. "Why did you come back here?" Rourke asks, tone flat as unpolished metal. Mayfield's eyes lift, gray with guilt he's long since compartmentalized. "I needed to see it again. I kept thinking we all misunderstood something." "Something like what?" He hesitates. She was worried, said someone had a key to the cash box, someone who shouldn't. "You?" "No," a pause. "She said Dale, but I don't believe she meant that." Rourke doesn't press. He has learned that the guilty prefer to exonerate others. It sounds like mercy and smells like fear. Then Marion, her hands clasped so tightly could pass for prayer. "Do you remember when you ordered the tape?" "Of course, for the windows. It was sticky that summer. You remember the heat." "I do, but why 2 rolls? The receipts show the choir only needed 1. She blinks. "The second was in case." "In case of what?" "In case things came loose." "Did they?" Her lips tighten. "They always do, Lieutenant, eventually." Dale finally walks in like a man who's memorized the exits. He smells faintly of turpentine and oil soap. Rourke lays the photograph on the table. The cracked watch gleams faintly. "You recognize this?" Dale squints, frowning. "Can't say I do." "It's a Timex, early 80s. Crystal cracked. Looks like you wore one in your ID photo." He shrugs. "Might have, can't be sure. Lot of time since then." Rourke's silence fills the room like humidity. "Did you ever tape that latch?" Dale looks at the ceiling. "Not that night." "You sure?" "I'd remember." "Would you?" "I said I'd remember." "Funny thing, Dale," Rourke murmurs. "So would I." The interviews end. The silence that follows is almost tender. 3 stories, none aligning, all rehearsed. He knows one thing only: the watch didn't lie. But watches don't speak. They just keep time until someone stops them. That night, Rourke drives home in the slow rain. His headlights cut through a mist that smells faintly of iron. He can't shake the sound of Evelyn's metronome, the imagined tick, even now, steady as guilt. Somewhere in the static of those interviews lies the rhythm he's missed. 5 clues emerge slowly, linking inconsistencies to emotional conflicts. The first clue is linguistic, the word canceled. Marion Coyle's word, used by no one else, carried from her statement into the public record. She claimed choir was canceled, yet the bulletin found beneath the piano, dated June 12, was printed that afternoon. Evelyn had typed it herself. No mention of cancellation. A single line, practice at 8:00 sharp. Someone lied. Someone canceled for convenience, not truth. The second clue comes from the maintenance request. Rourke visits the hardware supplier listed on the form, Garrett's Supply, a storefront that smells of rust and memory. The owner, white hair slicked back, remembers everything. That tape, yeah, Marion bought it, but she wasn't alone. Brought the janitor. He paid cash for an extra roll, said it was for fixing a broom handle. Rourke writes it down. Did she seem nervous? She seemed careful, like she already knew something was broken. The third clue emerges from a forgotten box in the evidence archive, labeled Miscellaneous, 1984. Inside, a folded sheet, photocopy of Evelyn's personnel file from Briar County General. A note attached by the original investigator, found in her purse. No relevance. But relevance shifts over decades. In the file, a disciplinary memo, Evelyn had reported unethical disposal of medical supplies. The supervising custodian was Dale Pritchard, terminated weeks later. Rourke exhales slowly. A history of theft, a public accusation, a forced proximity reborn in a church basement. The fourth clue isn't found, it's remembered. During the second interview, Mayfield's hand trembled when the metronome was mentioned. Not with fear, but with something smaller, deeper. Remorse, habit. He admitted owning a watch that looked similar, but claimed he lost it that summer. His wife, now long gone, had once given it to him for their anniversary. The crack on the crystal, dropped it while tuning the piano. He had, however, replaced it months later with the same model. Consistency has its own scent. Rourke builds a map of interlocking motives. Evelyn knew Dale's theft, threatened to expose him. Marion, indebted to Evelyn and secretly shorting the choir fund, feared exposure too. Mayfield, enamored perhaps, protective perhaps, knew something he didn't want to speak. A triad of shame, a single room, a woman too honest for their balance. He reconstructs the final hour, detail by detail. Evelyn finishes work at the hospital at 7:45, drives to the church. Dale, closing the building, leaves the side door open for air. Marion arrives around 8, ledger in hand. A brief conversation may be tense. She leaves by 8:10, claiming the heat. Mayfield enters at 8:15, his watch cracked, his patience thinner. He finds Evelyn arguing by the piano. The tape is already on the latch, a leftover precaution or an excuse. She calls him careless, maybe complicit. He reaches to stop her from leaving, palm pressing the piano lid. The fallboard lowers. The reflection captures him. A metronome falls. One sharp motion. Silence. He writes it all out, then crosses it through. Logic, not emotion, must prove truth. But sometimes logic is only emotion translated into order. A new DNA result arrives. The mitochondrial sample from the tape, matching partial lineage to Marion's sister's family. Not proof, but proximity. Marion had touched that tape. Perhaps only when buying it, perhaps not. But the adhesive remembers. Rourke visits her that evening. The house smells of lilac cleaner and resignation. You knew Evelyn was worried about the money. Marion pours tea that neither drinks. She worried about everything. She lent you $50. She wanted to help. You used her kindness to cover the shortfall. A pause long as an old hymn. She said she'd tell Dale if I didn't repay. Dale scared her. I thought she was bluffing. And when she died, Marion's eyes glisten, not with grief but fatigue. It wasn't supposed to be that way. Rourke waits, pen idle. She said she'd talk to him that night, said it'd be better if someone told the truth. Did you go back? Her lips tremble. I was afraid. Of him. Of all of us. When he leaves, the metronome ticks again in his head. Each clue leads not to revelation, but to motive's corrosion, the way guilt passes between people like static. 6. Unexpected twist reveals the least suspected person as killer. The next morning, Rourke drives to the courthouse to meet the archivist, a man with a fondness for outdated minutiae. They review the 1984 telephone logs once more. The call from Lark's feed and seed at 8:19 wasn't random. The number dialed, the church office. The voice on the line, according to a surviving note in the operator ledger, was female. Marion was home by then. Evelyn was at the piano. Only one other woman had reason to call that number, Mrs. Mayfield. She had worked at Lark's part-time, covering the register evenings. She'd married the choir director young, endured his affairs, and left town 2 years later, divorced and hollow-eyed. Her statement from the time, non-existent. No one had asked her. She wasn't on record. Rourke finds her in a nursing home outside Birmingham, fragile, lucid in fragments. "Mrs. Mayfield," he says softly, "you made a phone call the night Evelyn died." Her eyes narrow, slow recognition flickering like static on an old TV. "I called him," she whispers. "He wasn't home, thought he was at the church again." "Why call the church?" He said he was staying late with her. "I wanted to hear the truth." "Did you speak to anyone?" "No, the phone rang. Someone picked up but didn't speak." "What time?" "8-something before the storm." "Could you hear anything?" She closes her eyes. A metronome, then something fell. Rourke feels the blood settle in his chest. The call at 8:19 reached Evelyn, not Mayfield. Evelyn answered, metronome ticking, latch taped open. She never hung up. He plays the tape from the new evidence log, an old reel salvaged from dispatch recordings, unearthed by the technician. In the faint hiss between operator lines, there's a background click, a metronome, then a dull, wet sound, then static. The logic snaps into focus, clean and cruel. Evelyn didn't meet Mayfield at 8:15. She called him. She was alive. The photograph's watch reflection, cracked, metallic, belonged not to Mayfield's wrist, but to hers. The curvature of the piano's lid had reversed the image, a mirror's trick. Evelyn's watch cracked at work, worn on her right hand. She wasn't watching someone enter. She was documenting the tape, the latch, the scene, perhaps for proof, perhaps instinctively. She was her own witness. The camera lay near the piano after the struggle, unnoticed for decades. The killer was Dale Pritchard after all, but not out of greed, out of fear. Evelyn had proof he'd been stealing church funds, that Marion covered it up. She called him to confront, alone in that room, trusting the quiet. He struck, panicked, and staged the rest. Marion, finding the body later, had removed the cash tin to avoid scandal. Mayfield had arrived only to find aftermath. The guilt, the silence, the lifelong shame, they had all shared it like inheritance. Rourke feels no satisfaction, only the hollow click of cause and effect aligning like teeth. When Dale is arrested, he says little. "Didn't mean to," he murmurs. "She fell. I taped it shut so no one else would see." "See what?" "My mistake." Justice once again takes the shape of procedure. Boxes sealed, statements notarized, history refiled. 7 ends with moral reflection. Truth isn't always visible on surface. Winter comes quietly to Briar County. The church is painted anew, though the piano still sounds slightly flat in summer heat. Rourke stands by the door as workers remove the last strips of yellowed tape from the window. The air smells clean, but empty, like a confession with no audience. The case is closed. The headlines are precise, efficient. Arrest in 1984 choir murder. Closure after 41 years. Closure, a bureaucratic mercy word. He walks the room one last time, tracing the edges of memory. The dust has been replaced by polish. The ghosts remain indifferent. The piano lid reflects only him now, older, steady face lined with too many unsolved hours. He wonders if Evelyn knew in that last moment that she was recording truth, or if she simply meant to keep evidence neat, like the nurse she was, cataloging harm until someone else could name it. The metronome sits on the bench, its pendulum still. He starts it, lets it tick. The rhythm is perfect, clinical, heartless. Tick justice. Talk regret. Tick paperwork. Talk silence. Outside, the bell rings the hour, 8 o'clock, honest again after decades of lies. He writes his final note in the file before closing it forever. Truth found, peace uncertain. In the end, justice feels mechanical, an apparatus grinding toward equilibrium. The people are left behind, their motives fossilized, their remorse unmeasured. Evelyn Rae Mallory remains 27, preserved in the still air of that June evening, a testament to how time can pause around one small act of violence and never truly resume. Rourke turns off the metronome. The silence that follows is clean, almost holy. He doesn't mistake it for peace.